Welcome to The Link. I'm Brandon Johnson with VoigtJohnson Real Estate, and tonight I'm joined by Ted Manderfeld of Deuces Wild, the entertaining extraordinaire. Ted, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
We kind of a late night, put the kids to bed, come on in. How old are your kids, or how many kids do you have?
I have two girls. They're ages 6 and 9. They'll be 7 and 10 next month.
Gotcha. I have 9 and 12, so I kind of...
You're like exactly 3 years ahead of me.
Yeah, the bedtimes get incrementally later and later, and especially with summer. And
yeah.
I don't know how hard you guys stay on routines, but routines go out the window the older they get.
You try. You know what? They went out the routines went out the window with distance learning. is what happened.
Yeah. How did distance? I mean, did you participate in any of that? I'm just curious, or how that went for you, or
full on
ready to graduate in a week afterwards.
I went from comedian to professor real quick. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about professor. More average below average teacher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, for the younger kids too. I was on, or my youngest is third grader, and to see in some of her calls, and these teachers did a lot to get ready to put some of these curriculums together. But it's hard to have 29-year-olds on a Google call at once and keep any semblance of structure.
Well, and my brother's a 5th grade teacher out in California, and just the challenges they face with having to get everybody on the same page and keep them motivated, it's next to impossible. Yeah. So I mean, hats off, major kudos to especially here. My kids go to school in Sartell, and they did a great job of keeping them motivated for as long as they did, even though it's like a senior slide for every grade from 12th down to kindergarten, pretty much.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I think, I was talking a little bit, is just to have the kids adapt and shift to something so suddenly, to learn how to, nobody's world's been changed upside down like this for everybody, but to go through that as kids, I think, is a good learning, not to get status quo complacent, to be able to adapt, I think, is kind of a cool thing at a young age.
Adaptable's good. I just think, the best part of school is being there and kind of, suffering through it with all your friends.
Right.
Even though my kids love school, but when you take away the social aspect of it and you really get to the nuts and bolts of just learning facts and figures, it's like, ooh, that could be a challenge. Yep.
So are you from St. Cloud originally?
I am. Yep. I grew up right here. Lived the first 6 years of my life in St. Joe, but
gotcha.
And then we moved to St. Cloud when I was in 1st grade, and grew up here.
Go to Apollo then, or?
Nope, I graduated from Cathedral.
Okay.
In 98. That ages me.
Yeah. Well, I got you by a few years, so don't feel too bad.
That's right. Are you from here?
I am not. I'm from southern Minnesota. Owatonna.
I know it well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We traveled down there too.
Where do you play it down there?
We have done the hospital fundraiser down there at the golf course. We play in Faribault.
Yep. At
the Paradise Center for the Arts. We travel a lot.
Sure.
So I've gotten to see every little corner of Minnesota.
Not too far away, 2 hours.
Uh-huh.
So what did you like to do? What were your hobbies, interests growing up? Were you always music, sports, outdoors, all of the above? What kind of did you do outside of school?
More the first two. So I didn't really grow up in a hunting, fishing family.
Yeah.
We'd fish off the dock at my grandparents' lake cabin down in Dassel, but mostly it was sports, and then music came kind of around the same time, kind of around 5th grade.
Yeah.
Really got interested in, but I was I played 3 sports in middle school, grade school, middle school, high school. Played 2 years of college football.
Oh, really?
I did. But music was always the passion.
Yeah.
So
instruments, all kinds of instruments, singing, everything.
I started, funny enough, like in grade school, I was always afraid to sing because that was not cool.
Yeah.
So I went to Catholic school as a kid, so you'd have to go to church every week, and if you don't want to be caught being the boy in 3rd grade actually singing, so you're very timid, which looking back, I wish I had sang more because I'd probably be a better singer.
Yeah.
But I started off really on piano.
Okay. Now, was that something that you gravitated to? parents kind of said, hey, we're signing up for piano lessons, or?
You know, the way that I remember it, and I have a terrible, my family can attest to the fact that I have a terrible childhood memory, but I don't know if it's all because I have to block it out or what, but I started off in 5th grade taking piano lessons because my mom started taking lessons from the lady up the street, just 6 houses away, and then I had kind of an interest in wanting to learn how to play.
Sure.
And so we started at the same time. And then I took 4 years of lessons till I was in 8th grade.
You just loved it right off the get-go?
No, I didn't.
No?
Actually,
no?
I loved music.
Yep.
I loved music, but I hated practicing. I don't want to sit and play scales and learn the basics. I want to be able to play what I want to play.
Yep.
So I don't want to play, I don't want to sit and run, arpeggios all day. I want to sit down and play Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Because that's fun. And the first time that connects is like, oh, that happens.
So as you're getting older, did you kind of branch out other instruments, did it kind of snowball just the music interest, or was it always just kind of piano, sports?
Well, it's a bunch of stuff all at once. So it's, the piano lessons were happening.
Yeah.
But then by the time 7th grade rolled around, I got into middle school band, and I became a percussionist.
Okay.
So, because I don't want to play saxophone or flute or, clarinet or trombone or anything. I was like, well, I want to rock.
Yeah.
Which they don't tell you don't really get to rock right out of the gate. And if you're the only kid that knows how to read music when you're in 7th grade, you're not playing snare drum and bass drum. You're playing xylophone and marimba and the chimes, because you can actually read the notes.
Yep.
So I'd always get stuck with the bell parts when you want to be rum bum ba da 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 da, but it's da 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 da.
Yeah.
So
did you do marching band and all of that too?
No, I didn't do that. So I was in pretty much every. The good part about going to a place like Cathedral was that I could be in a lot of things at once.
Yep.
So, I was in the musical. I was in, right out with Father Chris Trussell. I was a townsperson in The Music Man by the time I was right out of middle school, 7th grade.
Sure.
And then was in musicals and acting my whole middle
so
school
you're in
and
plays
high school.
And all that?
Plays, mini singers, band, orchestra, choir.
Yeah.
Like all the little like pop groups, jazz band, just anything that had to do with music. I wanted.
So very
to
comfortable on stage.
Yeah, try to be.
Yeah.
You try to be.
Yeah.
But that's because I come from a family where my dad was an actor.
Okay.
So he wasn't an actor professionally, but he was in college and
sure.
Just growing up, I always had a fascination with like TV shows, and you become a student of those things, and you don't really know it at the time, but it's like when you watch them, you're taking little pieces. It'd be, my dad showed me the Marx Brothers when I was a kid, and you start to learn timing. Even if you don't know you're learning it, you're learning, oh, that's how you tell a joke. There's power in the
timing.
Pause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus if you just power through something, or if it's like, God, what's a good Groucho Marx line? He says, this is my favorite. I don't know. Is this a family?
You can say whatever you want.
Say whatever you want. Well, it's not even that bad. This is the 1950s. I love telling this story because he says, I love when you can be cheeky without being dirty. So he's hosting this right in his biography. I love that he says he's interviewing a woman on his game show that he's hosting, right?
Yep.
And he says, and he's finding out about her like this, kind of like they do on Jeopardy, where he's asking about their life or whatever. And he says, well, tell me about yourself. And she says, well, I have 13 children. And he says, oh, why do you have 13 children? She says, well, it's because I love my husband. He says, well, I love my cigar, but I take it out of my mouth once in a while. The 1950s TV. That's dirty without being dirty. And that you hear or you read something like that, and it's like, oh, that's wit.
Yep.
So it's Marx Brothers. It's not just slapstick comedy, even though, I liked, as a kid, a lot of boys would be attracted more to sort of Three Stooges or, you have that kind of stuff, but you go way back to those and it's genius. But then at the same time, that's, when I'm growing up, it's Billy Madison. It's Adam Sandler. It's
Leslie
Saturday
Nielsen.
Night Live. Leslie Nielsen, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Naked Gun.
Yep.
It's laying awake late enough at night with my orange computer monitor that my dad turned into a TV that
Sure.
had 9 channels on it.
Yep.
Because it was connected to a VCR that
Yep.
had channels 2 through 13.
Yep.
And staying up late enough even when you're not supposed to stay up and watch In Living Color.
Yeah.
So it's watching Jim Carrey and Damon Wayans and all that sketch comedy stuff and Johnny Carson. All these guys, so without knowing it, you're being entertained, and not knowing that I'd ever do it myself.
But just from
You know?
listening to it, you're watching this through the prism of observing, not consuming, right?
Yes.
As 95% of the people would just be consuming, laughing. It sounds like you're kind of subconsciously or consciously grasping at what makes the pause, the time. You're observing into how this functions, right?
Yes, and I've done that with the weird part is that once I got a little older, when I first started in Deuces Wild, the guy that I took over for was probably he had told me, or he maybe just kind of solidified the fact that he said, anytime you watch something,
Yep.
become a student of it,
Yep.
which sort of I just did naturally anyway. It'd be like when I go watch a concert. If you go watch a concert with me, I'm not there to dance. Even if I go to a bar, even when I was in my 20s and I go to the bar, I'm not out there to dance. I'm there to sit and watch. How do they play? How do they interact? How do they control an audience? What's the banter like?
Yeah.
You know, is there chemistry on stage?
Yep.
All of that, and I'm just to this day I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story, and Devin's heard me say this before, but my freshman year in college, you taking general classes, right? So I'm taking sociology, and the craziest, nuttiest professor just out there, right? And I remember this. He would bring his boombox. This is 1994.
Sweet.
Boombox, and we'd sit in the quad, and he'd play Four Non-Blondes, What's Going On.
What's
and
up?
we would all sit there, and he'd walk around with that, what's going on? And that was we're supposed to observe and watch. And so I always think of that, and you telling that sort of story reminds me of the approach of always just watching what's going on, right?
Absolutely. 25 years and my life is still
Yep.
trying to get up that great big hill.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Cool. So through Cathedral, sports, music, off to Concordia. What was
Yes. Concordia and Moorhead.
Moorhead? And you said football?
Yes. And so my dad was the director of financial aid at Hamlin University
Okay.
in St. Paul. And so for us, it was just, it was unspoken, but spoken. It was like he got a deal to where he would get, I think they called it reciprocity with other schools in the MIAC.
Yep.
So you'd get a certain % off your tuition depending on what the school was. So my choices were basically Concordia, St. John's, St. Thomas, St. Olaf, Hamlin, which is where my brother went.
Yep.
McAllister. I think I could have gone to McAllister, and I don't honestly remember the.
Yeah.
You could have gone, but some of them didn't have as good of a deal. It'd be like 50% tuition.
Sure.
Whereas I think at Concordia I got like 90% off tuition or some real high percentage.
Yep.
And a couple things lined up because I thought I wanted to be a music major.
Okay.
So they had a good music program. They had a good football program.
Yep.
Because I knew I wanted to play college football.
So you were going to be a musician, right? I
wanted to do something with music.
Gotcha.
I didn't know what. I played in bands in high school.
Yep.
Not just band, but you start your rock bands or whatever when you're in high school. But I didn't know. I had no idea how you'd make a living doing that.
Yeah.
It's always kind of floating around in the back of your head as something you can do, but you just have to get through those 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was always the way that my dad would say it would be basically, get your education, then your life is yours.
Yeah.
Once you got that, then you got your thing you can fall back on or whatever. And I really picked it just because the tuition thing, but then it was far enough away from home because I wanted to get out of St. Cloud.
Sure.
Just to go do something else. Even though I have great respect for St. John's and everything, but it's just too close to home. It felt like I was going to be.
Yeah.
It's not even really leaving.
Right.
I didn't want to really go to St. Thomas. I wasn't going to go to Hamlin. So it was kind of down to either St. Olaf or Concordia, and Concordia just ended up being a better fit. So played 2 years of college football up there. Started off as a music major, but once I got into it, found out I didn't. I appreciated the sort of solidification of some of the theory that I knew and some of that stuff, but I was like, I could kind of see where it was going, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to learn how to be a choir director. I knew for sure I didn't want to.
You wanted to play Motley Crue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is the story from all the way back to my first recital.
Which is not what they're teaching you.
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, even as a fifth grade boy, when I'd go to the recitals, I would be, you'd get the program and it would be little girls, mostly little girls, because I was one of maybe two boys that took piano lessons, and it would be, Chopin, and it would be all the names of the pieces, and it would be Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven. Then it would get down, it would say Nikki Sixx.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
And I knew that would work because the first time I was in 7th grade, so my older brother Nate is 4 years older than me. And I'll never forget my first year in John the 23rd. So I'm in 7th grade, he's in 11th. And he was in choir, even though he has no rhythm and can't sing a note. But I had went to a cathedral basketball game that my brother was playing in.
Yep.
And he was playing another guy that he had graduated with. His sister had the sheet music for Home Sweet Home. And she brought it to that basketball game. And I'll never forget sitting there with that sheet music. I can still picture it. It's a white sheet music with Motley Crue on the front from their Theater of Pain, dressed in full.
Sure.
It's black and white, and I'm just sitting there looking at it because I'm like, I don't care about the game. I can't wait to get home
and play
this.
Yeah.
Play that, and I'm just like, I want to do this. So I go home and I learn it, and then probably maybe a week later, after I've got it down a little bit, my brother calls me in, like in between classes, right? So I'm supposed to be going to my class, and he's like, Ted, come here, because it was right by my locker, the choir room. He's like, sit down and do what you did. And I sit down and I start playing it, and here comes 3, 4, 5, 17-year-old girls gathering around, and as
you're like, this is for me.
I'm like, this isn't terrible.
Yep. Yep.
So, that pretty much, whether you know it or not, it's like all these little.
But that was your passion.
Things. Yes.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yep.
To this day, I'd rather do music. I don't hunt. I don't fish. I'm not in a bowling league or a golf league. If I have the choice, I either want to talk about music, create music, produce something, run my business. Like that's.
Yep.
And you have to.
Yep.
If you're going to do any kind of artistic endeavor, I don't care what it is, you better figure out what it is that you would do anyways, and then just find a way to make a living doing it.
That's exactly right.
Because the truth is that even through all this stuff, it's like I still want to do music.
Yeah. Because if you chase the money, there's always going to be someone who's doing it not for the money that's going to work harder because it's not work. Right?
Yep.
That's going to beat you out.
Yep. Every time. And that's why it's just, you gotta, if you're lucky enough to find that, people always talk about it's the great fallacy of retirement, really.
Yep.
Which is, it's like, well, I've been asked so many times, how long are you going to do this? I'm like, I'll do this till my fingers fall off. Yeah. I'll do it till somebody doesn't want to hear me. I'll do it until if two people want to sit around and listen to me be a smartass and sing songs, I'm in.
Yeah.
Count me in for whatever that is, So I don't know, it's that retirement becomes just like a choice.
Right. Right. So how did you get involved into Deuces Wild, or walk me through that kind of process or transition?
So while I was at Concordia, there was 2 times. One time I had seen Deuces Wild, even though I didn't know what it was. We were just going out to the bar, and they were playing at a place called Playmakers up in Fargo, which is now, then it was the Hub, then it was, I think it's the Avalon Events Center now. So they didn't even do stuff, but it was a big public, live music venue. And they could put a ton of people in there, and I remember being in there, and it was 1,000 people maybe in front of you.
Yeah.
And just standing in the back, and I just caught the last part of the show, I remember it being rowdy.
Yeah.
Very R-rated, but fun, like an energy. And I was like, how are these guys making this noise? Like, how do they play like this? How do they play to this audience?
Yep.
That was probably my junior year. So you're talking 2000, 2001, something like that.
Okay.
Fast forward to my senior year, and in the spring of my senior year, I was working a college job booking airline tickets for a now defunct airline called National Airlines, where I'd sat on a phone.
Yeah.
And by then, so I was in college, I was a Spanish major. I went and studied in Mexico City for 6 months when I was in college. And so when I came back from that, I'd worked at Finger Hut in the bilingual collections place, and then I had scored a job with them, and you get paid a premium because if somebody calls in and needs somebody that speaks Spanish, I can change their airline ticket in Spanish, right? Yeah. And I remember sitting there, and it was right next to a bar called Borrowed Bucks Roadhouse, and I don't truly remember. I know that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no job lined up. I mean, we're talking March, April of maybe even May of my senior year. And I'm going to have 2 majors and a minor, but no I mean, maybe I'm going to move to the cities. Maybe I'm going to move back home. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yep. Or I'm going to go be a musician. I'm going to go join a band somewhere and just figure it out. And they were, Deuces Wild at that point had been, I mean, I know the story now, but at the time I didn't know. They had moved over to this other bar, which was a smaller bar, but they had moved over there because the guy went and saw them at Playmakers, and he's like, if you are willing to leave Playmakers, I will hire you 4 times a year in all of my clubs. So Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Sioux Falls, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. You trade your one big gig in Fargo for a guaranteed 20 gigs, every year or whatever it was, which is kind of a no-brainer. So they're right next door. This is probably, I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm in the middle of my shift, sitting next to my manager, who was a wonderful woman, God rest her soul, and I don't know maybe I saw it on the marquee or something. It just said dueling pianos or Deuces Wild dueling pianos, and I didn't really know anything about them. Yeah. And it's strange because it's one of those moments where I don't. It sounds so like you either made it up, right, or something. But there was some kind of a draw
where it was just like.
Well, it said something told me that I had to go over there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could call it divine intervention, you could call it God, you could call it instinct. And I'll never forget. I remember turning to my boss, and I said, "I'll be right back." She said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'll tell you when I get back." Yeah. And I got up and I walked out because it was right next door. Yep. So I walked over. I go into the club and nobody's in there. I mean, this is 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The bar's empty. There's maybe 2 staff. Yep. I walk in. The stage is set up. There's two pianos up there, and Mark, the guy who I eventually would take over for, was gone, and just Dave, who's now my business partner and one of my best friends in the world, is just finishing up sound check in an empty place. And I just walked in and was like, "Hey, my name's Ted. I'm just curious, how do you do what you do? Yep. How do you get into doing something like this?" Yep. And he just looked at me and was like, "Where can a guy get a haircut around here?" Which now knowing him is like, that's so Dave. Yeah. It's just, which I love about him. He didn't care at all. And
you were just some guy who walked in.
Which now, having done it for 20 years, I'd have blown me off too. Yeah. Yeah. But I just said, but I was kind of persistent, and I just kept talking to him, and I told him where to go get a haircut. And then I'm like, and at the time I was playing piano bar at the Radisson in Fargo, North Dakota. Okay. So every Friday and Saturday night, I would go sit at the little grand piano with a microphone, going through a guitar amp, and just playing for tips, playing for $40 plus tips. Sure. And so something in me kind of had a little inkling that maybe I could do something like they do, but I didn't really know. And through that conversation, Dave said, I found out that the guy that he was working with was retiring. Well, retiring or moving on, you know.
How long had they been doing that at that point?
About 4 years.
Okay. So they're established.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were pretty well established. Yeah. They had come out of the Mall of America where they had met and had taken the act on the road. Sure. And built up a pretty solid reputation.
So does he say, "Let me see what you got, kid. Get on the piano," or how does that?
He said we're looking for somehow, and I wish I remembered exactly how it went, but he said basically it came out that they were looking for his replacement, right? Yep. And I said, "Well, are you auditioning people?" I said, "'Cause I'll audition for you right here, right now." Yep. Right? Even though I didn't know, so I'll never forget sitting on the piano, sitting down at Mark's piano, and he had like a song list, kind of taped to the piano of songs that he could do. And I remember looking down at, and I knew some of them, but not a lot of them. Yeah. And I was like, well, and so I had the idea that I wanted to go back and play "The House Is Rockin'" by Stevie Ray Vaughan, because it was like a piano solo I had figured out, and I thought that would be cool. And so I got up and I played a couple of songs in an empty bar with Dave, and he's like, well, you know, you're okay. Why don't you come back tonight, and we'll put you in front of an audience and see how you do. Sure. Okay.
Because a lot of people can play music, right?
Yeah, there's tons of people that know some songs.
The stage presence is what he's trying to figure out.
Maybe. Or he just, you know, now that I've done it for 20 years, I've had plenty of people on stage, even some very talented people that have gotten up and sang with us, or done a song, or played a song or two. But I remember I went back and I was so nervous. I was almost like shaking, right?
So did you go back and tell your boss where you were?
Yeah, so I went back and I sat down, and I couldn't focus on what I was doing.
Because you were amped up for...
I was like, I have to go back. I have to go back tonight and see what they're going to do. Yeah. I mean, I'm freaking out. There's going to be a club full of people, a lot of people my age that I know that are going to the show, and I have to go back and at some point be ready to get up. Yep. You know? And the beautiful part, she was such a wonderful woman. She was an older woman. She's probably my mom's age, come to think of it. And she was excited for me. She's like, you know what? Just get out of here. Like, go home. Yeah. Go home and go get ready. Yep. Then I think she even went that night, maybe, which was super cool. So I rounded up a couple buddies, went to the show, and I'll never forget sitting there watching, just because I would sit there and just be like it's like a puppy just sitting there, just waiting for his treat, you know, just like, come on. Because at the time.
So did he tell you anything like, hey, I'm going to call you up, or this is your point? You knew nothing, just, hey, be here.
Here's the beauty of it. So they do the whole first, at the time when we were playing in the bars, you do 4 hours, okay? Yep. So they do the first 2 hours, sit through the show, right? First 2 hours. And everybody's just, I mean, at the time, you play from, at the time it was probably 9 to 1. Okay. So show starts at 9. By 11 o'clock, people are getting pretty tuned up. Yeah. And I'm just sitting back there, you know, just butterflies. And I'll never forget, they're like, hey, we're going to take a break. Because we'd take requests, and they'd take requests for money and stuff. And I'm sitting there. I'll never forget walking up to Dave. I walk up to him and I go, hey man, you know, any idea when you're going to get me up? And he looks at me and just goes, who are you? And I'm like, you know? And I'm like, I'm the guy from like 2 hours ago? Yeah. Which, again, now knowing him is hilarious because especially at the time, he was just like, no, I don't think he knew. No. I don't think he cared. Which is the beauty of it. Which is why I love him. That's what makes him good. Yeah. Is that and then he's like, oh, yeah, okay. Sure, you know, we'll get you up in the second half. So now I'm just like, oh, God, you know, I can't wait to get up. And then fast forward, people are putting up requests. And for, again, divine intervention, for whatever reason, I mean, my plan was get up and play Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Yeah. Somebody puts up a request, and it wasn't somebody from my table, puts up a request for Ben Folds 5, which is my favorite piano player of all time.
Really?
Love him. I mean, you know, especially at the time, God to me.
So, I mean, it's just all falling into place.
And he holds up the request, and he's like, hey, we got $20 to play some Ben Folds 5. And Mark goes, well, I don't know any. And Dave goes, I don't know any either. I do, me.
Yep.
So I slow-mo, Chariots of Fire, run up to the edge of the stage like just a wanting little puppy, and big eye, I can do Ben Folds 5. And so then he's like, Mark leans over, what's your name? Oh yeah, Ted. All right, hey, give it up for Ted. He's gonna get up and he's gonna do some Ben Folds 5.
Yeah.
Now, a couple things would be, number one, we're in my hometown. Well, not hometown, but college town. So I know some people in the audience. Some of my buddies that I played football with are at some tables and stuff. And they had known, because during football, I had gotten up and done like some talent shows and stuff.
So they know that you're capable.
They know that I could play.
Yeah.
And I got up, and I'll never forget, I did Song for the Dumped, which is you can look that one up, kids. It's got some naughty words in it, but it's a banger, man. It's a great song. So I get up and give me my money back.
So everyone just start going crazy?
Well, sort of, because it's not everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
Plus we're 3 hours and 15 minutes into a show where people are they have a show to do.
Yeah.
So I get up and I do well, and Dave plays with me. Kind of just plays along with what I'm doing. And it was good. I would hate to go back and watch the tape of me actually doing it, because it might not be that great. It wasn't like, I got up and had some triumphant moment, but in my mind I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I get up, I do it, people cheer and stuff. Afterwards I go and I'm like, hey, you guys, I'm gonna sit and I'll help you take down all the equipment.
Yeah.
I'll just be here. I'll just hang out, ask
I'll
questions.
do whatever you need.
Whatever.
Yep.
Schlock gear, I'll do whatever. And I remember Dave, so Mark, first, I'm like, well, what do I got to do to get this gig?
Yeah.
I'll do anything. And Dave just goes, you're not right for this gig, or you're not ready for this gig.
Yeah.
So Mark says, well, he's right. You're probably not ready, but you do have what it takes. So he saw something that said, and which is now, again, in hindsight, is completely true. Because at the time I was totally green. And once you do the show long enough, you start to realize it's not just about how well you sing songs and how well you can hit the pitches and play the notes perfectly. It's not that at all. Not for that gig. It's how well can you entertain this audience.
Yeah. It's engaging the audience.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And so what I did is I said, well, I'll quit my job and follow you around until you hire me. And I quite literally did.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways it was, I had nothing to lose. Yeah. I had nothing lined up. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So for the next 3 months, I found out their schedule and followed them around to every gig they did. And again, became a student of the show. Yeah. So I sat and would watch, how do they interact? What are the bits?
Did they, over time, as show after show went on, did they start to formulate more of a relationship where you'd get to know each other, they'd get to learn a little bit more about your capabilities and build a little trust? Or how long did it take before it was kind of like, hey, you're the guy for the job?
I think so much of it is just persistence, because there was guys that came out. I mean, they had taken out an ad in the city pages, so there's
recruiting.
Very established musicians. It wasn't like, hey, from the second, you're our guy.
Yeah.
I will never forget going down to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and having a guy come out, and frankly, he was probably a better piano player, probably even a better singer.
Yeah.
But he came out once. I came out every single time. And so it's like I got to get up and do my little 5 to 10 minutes during the show.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how they transitioned. It'd be they would start the show, get the crowd warmed up. They'd be like, hey, here's Ted. He's going to come up. I would get up and I had kind of a few little bits. I had my I'd get up and do like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We had a whole bit of TV show stuff. So I'd get up, I think I learned Cheers, I learned Fresh Prince, I learned maybe 1 or 2 other songs, and then that was it. I'd have my little 10-minute window to get up and, but at the same time learn, but just keep watching. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do?
You just wanted it more than anybody else, right?
the way Dave tells it, he likes to say, guys would come out and they'd be like, well, this seems like a fun gig, but my kid's got soccer practice.
Yeah.
Or something. It's like, if you're going to do this for a living, this isn't a hobby.
Right.
It can't be. This needs to be your life. So it's like, in some ways, I had trained all that other stuff that I told you about, watching TV shows and listening to music and talking about music and hanging around other musicians. That's all, whether you know it or not, it's all training.
Yeah. And they had to have recognized your commitment early on, I would imagine, based on.
I like to think so. Well, I'm still here.
Yeah.
By the time they did make their decision, I think it was around August. So it was 3 or 4 months of following them around before they finally said, okay, you will officially be the guy that takes over, but we're going to put you on a 6-month probation.
Sure.
They said because we were pretty much exclusively a bar act at the time.
Yep.
They said, Dave said, if I don't like you, you're fired.
Yeah.
If audiences don't like you, you're fired. If club owners don't like you, you're fired. Because there's just but the beauty is that there's no safety net. It's like it's what I love about it.
Yeah. This is what literally gave you butterflies from the moment.
Yes. Because you don't get to be like, oh, well, there's always next time.
Right.
Yep. You get up, and what I love about comedy especially is that people either laugh or they don't. There's no participation trophy in comedy of like, well, hey, good effort, I smiled that one time.
Yep. Well, to your point earlier, is you said there's a better piano player, it's just as much improv comedy, right? That's what the show is, and music and singing and piano and instruments is just part of the improv.
Yes. Well, right? and over time, what I've sort of come to learn with a little bit of age and wisdom has been, it's also chemistry and reps.
Yeah.
Just repetition. So what gives me what really separates us is the fact that we have worked together for 18 years exclusively.
Yeah.
There's no substitute. I've had so many comments about people that come up and are like, you two work really well together. It's like, well, God, I hope so.
Yeah.
We've spent 18 years dedicating our entire professional lives to trying to be the best at what we do.
Yeah.
In our own way, in our own version of it. And it's like, that's fine. I've heard stand-up comedians say that they say you find your voice. I think in the movie Ray Charles said that. You basically start off imitating someone else, which is the same thing he did, but then he found his voice. Well, Dave and I have sort of found our niche, but it took us almost 10 years of being on the road together. Over 1,000 shows to really start to get comfortable, and in my humble opinion, in the last 5 years is when we've actually gotten good.
Because you've found your voice, and now you can just continue to grow. And I'm sure you're still trial and error. You're trying new things. Always. This doesn't work. You're growing, but you still got the base.
You learn to play within the framework of what it is. It's like, it's still two guys. It's still clap along, sing along. Fun interactive show, but it's learning how, like, the moments where you can make each other laugh, or where there's spontaneity of things that you can't prepare for. In the moment, where that's what's fun to come see us, even if you've seen us a bunch of times. It's like there's going to be something or somebody or some way that the show takes a little turn where a lesser experienced musician or entertainer would either let it go by or not know what to do.
But if you take it and run with it, it becomes a personalized show for that crowd, that becomes memorable.
Well, yes, absolutely. And so, even though I've never taken an improv class, I think where we turned the corner was when you gain enough trust and respect in each other's work to where we both know each other's strengths and weaknesses. I think we complement each other really well, but then we'll also be supportive if we're going to go down a road to explore either a comedic. It may hit a brick wall. But the beauty is that you can learn how to, even if you hit that brick wall, start your car back and get back on the road, and take a turn. And then where it used to be, we kind of had an agenda of like, I'm in the middle of this bit, and like if it stops or if it's sacred, well then I may have a little like anxiety towards you to be like, well, why'd you stop my bit? Whereas now nothing's precious.
Yeah.
No song is too precious, no nothing. And when you can understand that if you support your partner on stage,
you know each other's true intent now. It's not,
well, you've done it long enough where there's nothing that's so precious that it's like, well, this is my joke.
Gotcha.
Even if I said it at the first one that I said, if he uses it in some other context, you just let it go.
Yeah.
And vice versa, because we've both done plenty of things, and that's where material comes from, or where you start to explore. We have the same sense of timing and comedy, and
which it gets back to the chemistry, and not to cut you off there, but you go to my wife's favorite thing is the piano bar. She loves them, but when you go to Vegas or whatever, and you get two guys, one guy rotates in, another guy rotates. There's none of that. It's right, and that's where you guys stand apart. Is it's a joint show.
Yes.
Intertwined chemistry is the best way to phrase it, right?
It's like a different language or a different style.
Yeah.
So I like going to piano bars, but I could talk all day about why I think they're incentivized from the top down to not really create a show because they make their money from tips. Yeah. So one of the things, and it's counterintuitive, when we decided to stop being a bar act and beg for tips, then you can focus on the product. Yeah. And when you focus on the product, now the weird part is
the short term, right?
Yeah, it really is.
So you're taking the leap of faith. We're going to sacrifice some short-term monetary, and the leap of faith that our product's going to be better, that we're going to attract more people that will pay off in the long term.
Eventually, yeah.
Right?
And it ain't easy. I mean, it's not. That's not an easy one.
That's any business in a nutshell, right? Short-term sales versus long-term clientele.
Well, and it's relationships. It's like every business is relationships.
Yep. So
it becomes a long, slow grind of if you can. Our absolute motto every night is that every night's an audition, and you're only as good as your last show.
Yep.
It doesn't. The biggest contract I'll never forget. About a year. It'll be almost 2 years ago now. We went from a Friday night in Las Vegas, playing the biggest corporate show we ever did we were in the main ballroom of the Mirage.
Wow.
In front of 4,000 people, right? Where it was huge. I mean, huge production. They had pyrotechnics, all this stuff. The next night, we played Powder Ridge. For 200 people.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Both completely different. And those 200 people, why would they care or know that the night before you were in front of 4,000? No. Makes no difference.
No. They're there to have a good time that night.
And it's still fun.
Yeah.
And in some ways, they both have their appeal. It's fun to play for a big crowd, but on the other hand, I love the intimacy of it because there's things you can pull off that don't fly in that big crowd. So
in your show, you engage the audience quite a bit, and you'll single people out and heckle. I don't know if that's the right word, but
you could say heckle. That's appropriate.
I'm just wondering. There's got to be a time.
We say include them in the show. Willing or unwillingly.
Is there a time or two where it hasn't been well received by the person that you're including in the show?
Oh yeah.
And tell me a little bit about that, or how'd that go, or how do you dance or?
Well, you learn really quickly. Well, I'll put it this way. It happened. It didn't happen a lot, even back when we were a much more sort of R-rated show.
Sure.
Because what you find out, and I made this mistake very early on, and you only make it once. I was out in Chicago, and I had said something. There was a bit that we did where you intentionally call somebody out, and it's kind of planned, but the way that I addressed him was very. It's strange, but almost in a mean spirit, like, "Hey, why aren't you doing this?" Which you can get an audience to turn on you pretty quick.
Yeah.
And especially in a place like Chicago, that guy got pissed and was like, "I'll see you after the show," And it's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
And so you learn very quickly that you can get away with a lot, But if your intention is to either mock or really make fun of somebody for something obvious, or to go to a place that's really derogatory, that's not funny. Yeah. Like, dirty for the sake of being dirty is never funny to me.
Right.
I mean, some of my favorite comedians of all time are some of the dirtiest comedians.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Dave Attell and Daniel Tosh and whoever, Anthony Jeselnik and what's his face, Bill Burr, Joe Rogan. I mean, all those guys are brilliant comedians. Theo Vaughn, that have some of the most out there things.
But you don't want to cross that line with someone
because it's Bob Saget. I don't know if you know who that is.
Full House.
He's funny, but then he came out with a special, and it was horrible. I mean, just like dirty for the sake of being dirty. It's not funny.
And I haven't seen it, but my guess is it wasn't authentic to who you thought.
Right. Well, and it wouldn't even be because of the persona. It wasn't clever.
Yeah.
It wasn't well crafted. It was somebody. It's like, hey, here's the shock and awe.
Yeah.
So shock and awe to me is kind of the cheapest route to go.
Yeah.
Now, if you can find a funny way to do it, now you're talking. So like one time we were up in Grand Forks, and we had a guy get up, and we had kind of dug into him too much, and he had threatened us and said, hey, you better watch yourself the next time you're in town, to the point where we had to get the cops involved and say,
wow.
It turned out he was military and was on the Air Force
you
base
never
up
know
there.
who you're singling out. You never know, right?
Well, he was on our stage, and I don't remember what we had said, but we had sang some song to him, and we'd had him on the toilet seat in between the pianos and stuff. And so you start to go, why are you doing this? There's no satisfaction in any kind of power trip. So now, especially now, it's like, well, those days are behind. And now when I tease somebody or something, it's like, you gotta do it with a smile. Like if you like you're ribbing your buddy,
And that's gonna get the best audience reaction is if if the person you're kind of ribbing feels part of it too, right? Or plays along,
and to be a little philosophical about it, it's like once you build a brand and you have a show that people know, and that's what they're coming for.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been once or twice where somebody maybe can't take a joke and something, but it's like that's really, really, really rare.
Yeah.
Most people are very good sports. I found way more normal, happy, wonderful people that actually can take a joke.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we're very self-deprecating, so we'll make fun of each other.
Right.
And then once you start to see, it's not like we just pick on a certain person. We'll pick on anybody, including ourselves, all the time, anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So fast forward 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, your world switches on a dime, right?
Yep.
What is that first, or how? I'm assuming you have gigs booked that just no longer.
Yes.
And then what's the thought process, or okay, how are we going to adapt? Because you guys, I've seen you had live streaming shows. Mm-hmm. You've been online tremendously in the last 30, 60 days, right?
Yep.
As far as being visible, getting out there. But walk me through a little bit of your mindset on our world's shifted. Here's how do we adapt and what do we do?
Well, on the one hand, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could say I knew, but nobody knows.
Right.
In some ways. So, well, our last gig that we played was a theater gig at the Meyer Theater out in Green Bay on March 6th. And then we had a planned vacation. So in some ways it was good timing. In other ways it was like, well, so we played on March 6th. It was kind of really the beginning of COVID.
Yep.
Took our 3 weeks. We came back, and then things got real.
Shelter in place.
Yeah, I mean the whole drill. So I had to rebook everything from April, everything from May, push some stuff into June, but then even all that got canceled. Pretty much our whole summer is wiped out.
Right.
I mean, we're booked all the way through, March, April of next year.
Yeah.
So at this point, the hope is that there's still going to be a fall. But in my mind, I think a couple things happen. Like we talked about, what would you do even if you had to do it for free?
Right.
From a business standpoint, I would say you do a couple online things. That's one thing. One of the other pieces is that, you know, we run our business pretty conservatively, so we were prepared for being able to, you know, weather the storm. Yeah. The other nice part is that we're very adaptable, and we fit a lot of different situations, which is a big reason why we have a career to begin with. Yeah. You know, I have a very varied career when it comes to the types of events that I play. It's not like I only play live shows. I play corporate, I play fundraisers, I play country clubs. We like to, you know, I'll play in your driveway if you can afford me. And so the plan is we're going to do our first live show. So we've done 2 online shows as Deuces Wild. Okay. Next week, actually, at Les Musiques down in St. Michael. They have been the first venue that's adapted. Okay. And said, because they're a small business too. Yeah. And they said, and I think that's where you're going to see the first changes, is going to be the people that survive on this stuff, you know? And so they adapted. They're located inside of a theater. Yep. It's a 200-seat theater inside a bigger complex like Parkwood or whatever, you know? And they, you know, they're at, I think it's 25%, right? Capacity, something like that. I think they can only have like 50 people. Okay. Yeah, that's about right, because they seat about 200 at that specific venue. But they said, well, we'll adjust. We're going to do an outdoor concert, because now you can have 250. Well, so technically it's bigger than the venue is inside. Yeah. So we're going to roll the dice and see if people are willing to come out and socially distance, and for whatever that means. And when you're outdoors.
Yeah, I think you're going to have turnout. I mean, I think people are ready to get back to their life. Heck, I was at the Wright County Swappers this Saturday, and I was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was hundreds and hundreds of people, you know. Yeah. And I think people just want to get back to.
Well, so I've done a couple things. You know, I played a solo gig out at Great River, and that went really well. People are definitely ready to come out. And so my hope is that, you know, the pent up sort of energy for some live entertainment will still be there.
I think
that's where my hope. That's where my hope lies.
I think so. But to your credit, you've stayed relevant, right, by being visible online and still.
In my view, it's perspective. So for me, it's been, I'm either going to sit back and just let things happen, or I'm going to take the opportunity based on some relationships that I've built with, you know, like I did a live stream with Paul Diethelm, Stretch from the Armadillos, who's been one of my best friends forever, and I co-produced Rock and Roll Christmas Spectacular with him. Him and I did a show. I've gotten to be really good friends with a guy named Michael Shines, who's a local musician and a fabulous talent. Him and I did a live stream together, and so you adapt. You adapt and you move, and then even moving into the fall, our plan is to go on the road and either do some version of what we do, or you do. I mean, ideally it would be things are kind of more back to normal. Yeah. Whatever that is.
But you're willing to do whatever the world's gonna let you do.
Yeah, or you're going to play, if larger venues are at reduced capacity, maybe you do multiple shows. Yep. Maybe you do the reduced capacity with a streaming option. Yep. If the weather's nice enough, maybe you can move things outdoors. You you got to adjust. Yep. And the confidence comes in the fact that that's been our whole career. Yeah. Has been adjusting to whatever moving out of the bars into a more corporate and theater world was an adjustment. Yep. And we adjusted right around 08, 09. Yep. So when the bar scene kind of died, because the economy took a tank.
You know how to, just accepting the fact that you're going to have to always be adjusting is part of the change.
Well, what do you do? Yeah. I mean, it's really just an attitude of you either sink or swim. Right. And I'm going to keep swimming because I have to. Yep. Because there isn't that safety net of, hey, good job. It's like, okay, well, if I got to go do it, then I'll just find a way to go do it. Yep. It may not be at the same level or we'll have to adjust, but make it happen, man.
Well, cool. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy
welcome.
guy, and this has been fun. I've really enjoyed it. How do people, if they're not familiar with Deuces Wild, how do they find out more or get in touch with you?
Go to our website, wildpianos.com. So you can go there, wildpianos.com, and it'll have our schedule and what we're doing. Other than the one live gig for the summer so far, we'll just.
Yep. If you haven't seen them and you get the opportunity, by all means, check them out. It's a great experience. So, Ted, thanks again. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.